Hi guys, I'm Josh,
Hi, I'm Gabriel.
and welcome to our very first podcast. We're obviously in lockdown, and we can't do our usual videos, so we're going to try a vodcast instead. And today we're going to focus and talk about the neck.
Absolutely. So, Josh, tell us something about the neck. What are the main features of this body structure?
Well, the neck is quite a unique area of the body. Obviously, it's part of the spine, but it's a very unique part of the spine. So if we think about, say, sort of that upper mid back, that's a really sort of solid part of the spine. It's got our rib cage, it protects lots of our organs. It's actually quite a really sort of strong, secure part of our spine. Our lower back provides us with quite a lot of movement. We bend a lot from there. Yes, it's vulnerable because of that. But again, we've got big supporting muscles. We've got all those core muscles, all those abdominal muscles that we think about around the lower back. So when we think about the neck, I think we sometimes forget actually that that's also an extension of the spine. Because then when we think about the neck's role, actually it's very, very unique in the way that it moves and the amount that it moves, right? Yeah. So if we think about, say, the neck, if I want to look over my left shoulder, I can rotate my head all the way over to my left shoulder, roughly 90 degrees if I've got a decent range. I can then obviously go the opposite side. I mean, that's a 180 degree swing just from being able to rotate my head around my neck. So that's a massive amount of movement. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things that we see with the neck. And it's a great thing that we can move like that. But it leaves us potentially vulnerable because, like what we discussed in that shoulder video that we did, Gab, when you've got a lot of movement, you need to have the strength, support, control of the muscles to be able to support that movement, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the big features that we think about with the neck. And I think because of that muscle control is really, really important. So one of the things that we tend to focus on in clinic is what are some of the muscles around the neck doing, or more importantly, maybe what are they not doing, and how can we look at those working better and supporting the neck. You were thinking before we did this about sort of the relationship with our ability to look in different directions and the fact that neck and the neck allows us to do that. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the theory behind the evolutionary reason of such a great range of mobility in the neck is that it allows us to expand our field of view. So the fact that we can turn our head so much, as well as looking up to a very decent degree, from a survival point of view, is very important. It's key, and that reflects us in a way, even our choices in the clinic. Because if I have to choose which movement to prioritize in terms of rehabilitation, I always choose the rotation, because you can think about it, you're driving or you're crossing the road, it's key for you to be able to look on your right and your left. It's a matter of safety.
Yeah.
And that's something we should always remember to focus on when we treat the neck. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I like the idea though that we're thinking about like evolutionary and like things in danger. So like obviously thousands and thousands of years ago we were checking our shoulder to see whether a tiger's chasing after us or whatever. Whereas now it's like, oh, pass us that, will you? And our lives are obviously completely different. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think what the rotation element especially is often something that I see in patients complaining about when they're driving. So it's like, oh, I really can't check my shoulder to sort of see whether, and actually, to be honest, in all seriousness, there's an element of danger in that. Obviously, you can't check that blind spot. So obviously joking slightly about that, but I think that factor and that ability to rotate, like you said, is so important. And I think, yeah, I think I would approach things quite similarly when we're in clinic. Is what is that rotation doing? Can we improve it? Is it restricted? Okay, fine, it's restricted. Let's get that better, because it's such an important element of the neck, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So one of the things we have to think about, Gab, with the neck, like we mentioned before, is yes, it's an extension of the spine, right? So we said before, lower back, mid upper back, and then the neck, and we often forget that that neck is part of that spine. But obviously it's got a massive relationship with other surrounding structures, and shoulder specifically. When you're in clinic, when you're dealing with patients, when you're thinking about that area of the body, what are some of the things that you think about with the neck and then its relationship to some of those surrounding structures, especially maybe the shoulder?
Yeah, I believe that the neck, the upper thoracic spine, and the shoulder, including the shoulder blade itself, are a functional unit. So if one of those components is not working very well, then we might have problems in the surrounding neighbor structure. So more often than not, a neck issue might cause problems further down the line. So shoulder blade movement, shoulder itself. But if I have a very restricted shoulder, for example, I would still look at the neck, because the neck might be suffering just as a compensatory solution from the body. So from a pure mechanical point of view, the connection between neck and shoulder, if you want to simplify a bit, is fundamental, and a limitation in one of the two structures will affect the other to a point. Then if I have to say, most of the time a shoulder problem might be caused by a neck issue rather than the other way around, but we can't rule it out completely. So yeah, and the other very important structure that links the neck to the arm are the nerves. Do you want to explain us why?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is one of the next sort of major significant, what's what the word is, but one of its major sort of things that we need to consider when we think about the neck is the fact that actually all the nerves that supply to the upper limb, to our arm, come from the neck. So just like the nerves that go into our legs come from our lower back, the nerves that supply our arm, shoulder, elbow, all the way down to the hand and wrist, all come from the neck. So when we're thinking about the neck and we're thinking about it working well, we have to really take into consideration the fact that actually, is the neck getting us to a point where actually some of these nerves then become at risk? And you must have heard this before in clinic where patients sort of said, oh, it feels like a trapped nerve. More often than not, it's actually not, because they're not really displaying any nervy symptoms. And by that, we mean sort of your classic sort of pins and needles, numbness, altered sensation type sort of scenario. But obviously, actually, if that is the case, we know that any problem in the neck leading to a potential nerve issue is then going to have consequences for the rest of the arm. And I think what you were saying, obviously, before with the point with the shoulder, is that we've got to make sure that we consider the neck's importance to the rest of the body, but obviously specifically to those surrounding areas. So yeah, absolutely, shoulder blade. But then yeah, like what we're saying, if we think specifically about the nerves and the fact that that's a unique sort of point of note within the neck, that our nerves that supply our arm come from there, we've got to make sure is when we're in clinic, and also, you know, for our patients to be aware that that's the case. And for a happy, healthy neck, we want all the things around the neck working well, so that things like the nerves then don't potentially become vulnerable. And not only do we then wake up with a neck issue, we've then developed a neck issue which is then starting to affect the arm and the surrounding structures as well. A point I was thinking about before when you were saying about the shoulder, I often, when I'm dealing with patients, almost just take it for granted. If they've got neck pain, they're going to have a shoulder issue. And if they've got shoulder issue, they're going to have a neck issue. And when I'm saying issue, I don't necessarily even mean pain.
Yeah.
I'm talking about those compensations with that we see, right? So an area's vulnerable because it's, you know, it's in pain or whatever. Well, then that flack, that effort has to be taken from somewhere else. And we commonly see that, right, where you've got muscles around the shoulder working so hard to try and keep everything together and some sort of support. And so I think that's the thing we're sort of thinking about here, with keeping in consideration the fact that the nerves go into the arm. We want that neck to be working well so that actually those things don't become vulnerable, and we've got everything working, you know, as we want it to be. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. And if we can do an example that I think many people have experienced in their life, is an overactivation of the upper tract, so this muscle here. This is probably the key structure in terms of that people are aware of, that links the neck and the shoulder functionally, and usually an overactivation might be due to posture, for example, but it can develop into more serious issues just because of a lack of proper movement in that region. And this is an area where pretty much everybody who has been working on the computer for long enough will know what kind of discomfort it can cause and what kind of rigidity in the neck. So do you happen to treat a lot of patients with postural issue? Is this something that you see often?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more and more of it right now, right? So, I mean, lockdown, our lifestyles completely changed. We think, for instance, some people, as they go into work, they might walk there, they might cycle, they might run. At the minute, your commute is basically walking a few steps down the stairs from your bedroom to potentially even maybe say the sofa, and working on a laptop or computer or whatever from the sofa. I mean, which is far less than ideal. And we're generally seeing, well, I definitely am with some of the virtual sessions that we're doing, a lot of issues, neck being a big one, just purely because of people's life from sort of morning to evening on a day-to-day basis has completely looked different. They're maybe not as active. They're putting themselves in positions that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And more often than not, those positions are actually static and held for a long period of time. So if we think about posture and we think about the neck, for instance, we typically, if we think about a really bad postural position, we can all sort of picture that imagination. It's that thing that when we're at school, teachers go, no, back straight, shoulders back, you know, it's that upright sort of position is what we're after. But we all know what it looks like when it's gone wrong, and it's sort of that really sort of curled over, hunched position, shoulders are drawn forward. But then what we actually don't necessarily think about so much is then the effect of the neck when we're in that position. And it really brings the neck forward into sort of really sort of poked forward position. And actually, to come back to the nerve stuff we were talking about before, actually that makes it, the nerves actually really potentially vulnerable in that position. So if we think about, if I sort of turn onto the side onto the camera for those that are watching, and for the ones that are just listening, I'll explain. But we're in that slump position and we sort of poke our head forwards. The neck is then really in an extended position, almost as if we're looking up to the ceiling, up to the sky. And that places a lot of stress in the joints and actually closes the space for those nerves. So they're, like I said earlier, they're really potentially vulnerable. And that's a common pattern that we see. And like I said, we're just seeing more and more of it because people are sat at home, not really anything else to do. And also the people that maybe wouldn't ordinarily just be sat for long periods of time and now sat for long periods of time and developing issues off the back of that. So yeah, I think posture is a big one, and a big one when we think about the neck. And like we said before, its relationship with the rest of the spine and the surrounding areas is that actually if we look after those areas as well, we can also look after the neck. So being in a more upright position, which obviously comes from other parts of the spine, automatically places your neck in a better position. Having your shoulders blades back and sort of brought back and not sort of slumped forward and brought forward brings your neck into a more upright and better position. So these are really simple things that I think people can consider and think about, and look to try and keep an eye on for themselves on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, neck posture go hand in hand for definite.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of patients often ask, especially in this period where we're still in lockdown, what can I do to help myself? And for sure, we can do some specific strategies, stretches, strengthening exercise to straighten up the posture that our new lifestyle is forcing us into. But I think the first step is to move a little bit more. I know the excuses to do exercise are very little at the moment, with the gym closed and most of the outdoor sports closed as well. But truth is that we're still allowed to go out once a day. And I think a walk or a jog can take us a long way into starting that process of feeling better. So I suggest that everybody who's in that situation where they feel like their posture is degrading and they feel stiffer and stiffer, make sure you walk at least once a day, because that will change your posture for half an hour, and I'm sure you'll feel better. Then, of course, there are more serious situations or more advanced issues that might need specific treatment, but just a change of posture, change of activity, move a little bit more, and you'll see the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just as a final point on that, one of the things that I've been advising to patients, when typically I've given them maybe a couple of exercises to be working on in the meantime before I next see them, I've generally said, you know, think about maybe a time in the day where you can just set aside 10-15 minutes to get your exercises done. Whereas now I think, because actually people's lives are looking very different, they're maybe not, they're not losing time because they've got to commute to work or whatever it is, and they're obviously at home. I've actually shifted my focus to that input and exercises being much more regular. So actually, rather than say setting aside 10-15 minutes, I'm almost spreading that 10-15 minutes over the course of a day with patients, and I'll just say, do something every hour. So literally every hour, just a 30-second stretch, done, okay, fine. And then you crack on with whatever you need to do work-wise, or back to homeschooling or whatever it might be. And then the next hour comes around, okay, fine, now you're going to do this strengthening exercise and you're going to do this many repetitions, but one set, done. And then, and trying to create a bit more of that regularity of the exercises throughout the day, just so that we're putting our body in different positions and not, like we're saying, just getting sort of stuck in set postures, and asking our body different movement questions is I think the important thing.
Absolutely.
So we like to have this section of the podcast for your questions answered. So the neck is an area of the body that we often get asked about and brings about so many questions. So we're going to try and just answer a few, answer a couple of things that sort of often crop up within the neck, and we will try and answer them as best we possibly can, right, Gab?
Absolutely.
So we've actually had a question in from Dwayne in Retford, in Nottinghamshire, and he asks, why do I wake up with a stiff neck?
So that's a very good question, Josh. What's your answer to it?
You want me to take this one, do you? Okay, fine.
I do.
I mean, why do we wake up stiff? To some degree, I mean, that's you could be here for hours discussing that. But I think one of the many misconceptions that people have, especially with the neck, and especially waking up in the middle of the night, waking up in the morning with a stiff neck, is the fact that they automatically assume that they must have slept in a horrible position. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're in a horrible position, that's going to hurt your neck. So if you've got, let's just go silly example, 7 pillows and you're at a really horrible angle, well, of course that's going to hurt because your neck is not designed to be in that position for any length of time. Alternatively, opposite's true. Like if your neck is hanging down, you've not got maybe sufficient support, again, it might hurt your neck. But that's not comfortable for any length of time. And we don't sleep unless we're in a comfortable position. So more often than not, actually, the real reason that we wake up with neck pain or a stiff neck is actually the stuff that happens when we're not awake, when we're not asleep, sorry, and when we're awake. So if we think about a typical day, let's say, for instance, I'm right-handed. That means I'm going to be using my right arm more in the day than I'm probably going to be using my left arm, which means that actually I'm going to be using the muscles around my neck differently. So I'll have certain muscles on the right side of my neck that will have to adjust because I'm using my right arm all the time. I've maybe got muscles on the left side that are stabilizing and counterbalancing because I'm always using my right arm. Which then means that if I've got a scenario where maybe muscles are overworking, they don't like that. The muscles in our body loves comfort zone. And so if we take the idea that our muscles become a little bit unhappy when they're overworked and stressed, and then when we're static and still, they're given opportunity to tighten, and they're more likely to tighten when they're a bit stressed and a bit unhappy, well, then that tightness could increase, right? And if we're at our most static and our most still at nighttime, well, then there's a massive opportunity then for those muscles to tighten up over that time and for us to wake up in the morning and go, oh, God, what's happened there? And like I said, automatically assume that it's because we've been in a funny position while we've been sleeping. In actual fact, this happens all in the background without us realizing. And those tight muscles, those aggravated muscles from stress and working and blah, blah, get a chance to tighten up when we're sleeping. And we often see that as sort of that main reason of why we wake up with a stiff neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, right?
It is, yeah, no, I agree with it.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question, right? But yeah, I think that's one, like I said, one of the misconceptions that we often see is people assuming that it's, especially with sleeping, that it's position or even maybe the mattress. Again, ends of extremes are always going to be bad. If you're somewhere in the middle, I think you're going to generally be okay. We're not going to sleep unless we're comfortable. So if your mattress is uncomfortable, you're probably not going to fall asleep. If your pillows are an awkward height, awkward position, you're not going to sleep. So we generally look for a comfortable position to sleep in. So like I said, barring the extremes, the likelihood is actually that the muscles are given a chance to tighten up while we're sleeping. And then we wake up in the morning, having been static for all that time. And our muscles then go, whoa, I'm really, really tight. And I'm going to let you know about it. So we were talking the other day, actually, Gab, weren't we? A bit about whiplash. And you were saying basically that often comes up in sessions with patients about the concept of whiplash and the neck and questions around that. So just talk to us a little bit about that and what are some of the things that patients often sort of ask you regarding whiplash and obviously specifically about the neck in that situation.
Yeah, so whiplash is a frequent injury, we say, mainly due to car accident. And one of the common features is that the neck for a period of time becomes rigid and stiff and often sore. From our perspective, we often need to address a fear that the patients have that moving that stiff and sore neck might damage even more their neck when there's nothing so far from the truth. what we actually suggest, as soon as the pain starts reducing and the situation improves a bit, is to start moving and pushing a little bit in those movement direction, especially the rotation that we talked about before, so that the body becomes confident again into using those range of movements and the muscles that actually allow us our neck to work well. What I often say as a joke to patients is that the only thing that will clearly make them worse again is another car accident. And I'm not trying to tempt fate here, but that's the truth most of the time.
Yeah. And that's because more often than not, I mean, I'm trying to think of what percentages would be, and there will be a statistic out there, but it'll be in single figures, I assume, of the whiplash cases where in actual fact where there has been structural damage.
Yeah.
More often than not, actually what we're seeing is the body going in that almost protection mode where muscles just really, really tighten up because they didn't like the excessive force, rather than actually we were seeing anything that's torn or sprained or anything like that, right? So yeah, I understand the point and I understand the question, because actually what you're trying to say to patients is, look, don't worry, move, because
exactly,
the only thing as a hurdle that you've got in your way is the fact that it hurts.
True.
Actually, we don't have structural damage, and the force has come and gone, and like you said, fingers crossed it's not going to happen again.
Exactly.
So actually, let's just slowly start to move. Let's start that process of recovery, and almost to some extent, not let that pain get in the way. Right? It's like
Absolutely.
The more we're moving, the more that neck is starting to restore its movement, the easier it's going to feel in that mid to long term.
Of course, we're not talking about the same day of the accident or the couple of weeks following it, but often enough we see patients 5 months after the accident that are still very restricted in movement and they still have a high level of pain and protection. And more often than not is because they've been overprotective with their neck. They avoided movement for so long, and that just dragged the situation on and on until they get over that fear, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. No, it's I think as well when you think about a patient where they're in and they've, like you said, the car accident was 4, 5, 6 months ago. For those that are listening, our body roughly has about a 6-week healing recovery period. So if you've damaged something, give or take, it'll roughly take about 6 weeks to heal. So if you're still experiencing that high level pain, that sort of irritation and problem a few months down the line, chances are that it's not because of something that's damaged, because actually, well, then that healing period should have occurred by now. So there must be another reason. And like we're saying, is with something like that, let's get moving, because it's that protection mode and that retreating from movement that actually is just hindering things.
Absolutely. So thanks for listening to us. We hope you found the information we shared today useful. And of course, we suggest you to seek for our help and advice if you have a more serious problem with your neck or with any other region of the body. Please send us questions in the future, because we're going to do more podcasts like this. And if you have anything specific that you would like us to answer, we will do that with pleasure. So where can they find us, Josh? And they will see more videos of us in the future?
So if you haven't already, like we said, this is our first podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We've done previous video sessions before, workshops before, which you can find on YouTube. For any updates and info on the company and when we'll be back face to face, all of that you can find on our social media, Instagram, Facebook, or you could go on the website as well. So get in touch if you need anything. We're here to help, and we will catch you all soon, whether it'll be a video or a podcast. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.